The morning sun had barely shaken off its haze when Doris Hill shuffled onto the number 12 bus, cradling her handbag like it was something fragile and irreplaceable. Inside it, in a stiff white envelope, lay the largest check she had ever held in her life. She settled into her favorite seat, second row from the front on the right side, just behind the driver. She liked that spot, far enough from the doors so she didn't get jostled, close enough to see the road and feel like she knew where she was going. "Morning, Miss Doris," the driver called, glancing at her in the mirror. "Morning, Leon," she answered, tapping her transit card with the tiny flourish that came from decades of never being late to anywhere she said she'd be. "You on time today? I'm proud of you." Leon laughed. "Only because you'd yell at me if I wasn't." She smiled and eased down, knees whispering in protest. At 73, everything protested now. Her back, her hips, the knuckle in her left thumb that had taken the brunt of 3 different factory jobs in 3 different decades. She still carried herself straight, though. Her daddy had told her once, "You walk like you own your space, girl, because you do." She hadn't forgotten. The bus lurched forward, easing into traffic on Jefferson Avenue. It was one of those spring days that couldn't make up its mind. The sky flirted with gray, then blue, wind picking at people's coats like a nosy relative. At every stop, the bus sighed and kneeled, taking on new faces, new stories. Doris kept touching the envelope in her purse, fingers tracing the edge of it again and again. The city's logo was stamped in the corner, and beneath it, neat printed letters, settlement for property damage. The amount still looked unreal to her. $8,300. "Lord," she murmured under her breath. "Look at you, making away." It had taken 3 years. 3 years of calls and letters and forms she could barely read. 3 years since the city's water main had exploded under Maple Street, flooding her little house and buckling the floor in her kitchen. 3 years of fans humming, plaster flaking, and a cold draft slipping in under warped doors. Her son, Marcus, had helped with the paperwork, of course. He had called, pushed, insisted, used that steady voice of his that made people listen. But still, it had been her name on every line. Her house, her damage, her fight. Now, finally, the city had agreed to pay. She had imagined this day when she lay in bed, staring at the stain on her ceiling. She pictured herself walking into the bank, handing that check over, and walking out with the funds to fix her kitchen, her bathroom, her roof. To hire Mr. Jameson from church, who knew what he was doing, instead of that cousin her neighbor kept suggesting who did a little bit of everything, which usually meant did nothing quite right. She'd ironed her blouse twice this morning. It was a pale lavender one with tiny pearl buttons, the good one she kept in the back of the closet for funerals and graduations. Her slacks were black, pressed as sharp as her old hands could manage. She'd pressed her short, gray curls with the brush until they lay in a soft halo around her head. Her granddaughter had offered to do her makeup. "Nana, at least let me do a little gloss," the girl had begged. "You're going to the bank with a big check. You gotta glow." "I'm too old to glow," Doris had replied, but she sat anyway, letting the girl dab lotion and a whisper of powder on her cheeks. Now, as buildings and trees slid past the bus windows, she tucked a hand into her purse again, feeling the envelope like a heartbeat. It was silly, she knew, to be this nervous. A check was a check. She had cashed dozens in this very bank over the years. Her Social Security, her pension, the little extra Marcus slipped her on holidays even when she told him not to. "Money isn't a favor, Ma," he would say. "It's a tool. Let work." The bank sat at the corner of Jefferson and Ninth, a squat building of glass and beige stone with the bank's name in large blue letters across the front. Riverfield Community Bank. Above the entrance, a new billboard stretched wide across the facade, one of those glossy photo ads the bank had been plastering all over town recently. Doris hadn't looked at the new one yet. She saw the flash of colors and smiling faces as the bus pulled to a stop, but the door hissed open and the steps demanded her concentration. She took the railing firmly and made her way down. "Take your time, Miss Doris," Leon said. "Don't you see me?" She grinned. "I'm already doing that." When her shoes hit the pavement, her knees buzzed with the impact. She paused to steady herself, adjusted her purse on her shoulder, and stepped into the mild chaos of the intersection. Cars rumbled by. A man on a bike wove through lanes like they were suggestions instead of rules. A woman in a bright red coat hurried past Doris, talking into her phone, shaking her head at something only she could hear. Doris glanced up once at the billboard without really seeing it, just enough to register a tall man in a suit, kids in soccer uniforms, a line of smiling employees. She looked closer on the way out, she told herself. Right now, she had business. The bank's automatic doors parted with a sigh. Inside, it was all polished tile and the quiet hum of climate control. The scent of coffee drifted from a small station in the corner. Those tiny cups and free sugar packets. Sunlight from the front windows washed across posters on easels. We grow with you. Investing in tomorrow. The same messages she'd seen for years, just with newer faces. A short line snaked through the middle of the lobby toward the teller counters. Doris stepped into it, tucking her purse closer. A young couple stood in front of her, whispering and peeking at each other's phones. Behind her, someone wheeled in an office chair, its plastic wheels clicking against the floor. She looked up at the digital clock above the counters. 9:42 a.m. Marcus would already be at work, probably in some meeting, going through numbers. She pictured him in his shirt sleeves, tie loosened just enough to breathe, brow furrowed in concentration. The thought steadied her. One thing at a time, girl, she told herself. Get the money. Call Marcus after. On the other side of the lobby, behind the line of counters, Kayla Jensen repeated for the 23rd time that week. Welcome to Riverfield. How can I help you today? Her voice had that customer service brightness she could snap on and off like a light switch. It didn't reach her eyes, which were locked on the computer screen more often than not, dancing between numbers, codes, and little red flags that popped up when something fell off. She was 26, 6 months into the job, and exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with how much she slept. The pay wasn't great, the hours were worse, and the branch manager's motivational emails landed in her inbox with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. We're the face of trust, the last one had said. Guard it with all you have. Guard it, she thought now, tapping a manicured nail against the desk while an elderly man searched his pockets for his ID. Guard from what, though? From people. Always from people. Training had reinforced it. Fraud is everywhere. Scammers target banks daily. Be vigilant. Look for signs. Mismatched signatures. Nervous body language. Older account holders with unfamiliar companions. Checks from institutions you don't recognize. If it feels wrong, the trainer had said, it probably is. What she had not spelled out, but what Kayla had learned quietly by watching, was that some people got more scrutiny than others. Not officially. There were no memos. But she watched how the senior tellers looked closer at certain faces, how they asked just a few more questions when the person at the window was old or obviously poor, or wearing the wrong kind of clothes, or had skin like her friend Tasha's. Kayla wasn't proud of the way she absorbed those patterns without question. But the fear of making a costly mistake sat heavy on her shoulders, and fear has a funny way of slipping into the driver's seat when no one is looking. Here you go, the man in front of her said, suddenly, triumphant. He handed over his ID as if he'd just won a contest. Great, Mr. Patel, Kayla replied, smiling. I'll deposit that for you now. Transaction complete. She wished him a good day and glanced at the next person in line. Her eyes flickered briefly over the lineup. The young couple whispering, and behind them, an older black woman standing very straight, purse clasped in front of her. The woman's clothes were neat, but not expensive. The lavender blouse was a little shiny from wear, those pearl buttons slightly dulled. Her shoes were polished, though the leather at the toes was cracked. Her hair was short, gray, and carefully styled. There was a deliberate dignity there, a quiet, I may not have much, but what I have is in order. Kayla didn't notice those details consciously. What she noticed when Doris stepped up to her window 3 minutes later was the amount on the check. Doris approached slowly, careful not to lean too heavily on the counter. She didn't like people to see her struggle with standing. Good morning, she said. Good morning. Kayla chirped, the switch flipping on. Welcome to Riverfield. How can I help you today? I'd like to cash this check, Doris answered, pulling the envelope from her purse with both hands. She laid it on the counter as gently as if she were putting down a newborn. Kayla opened it and froze for half a second. 8,300.00, the amount read in neat machine print. Issuer, City of Brookhaven, Department of Public Works. Payee, Doris Mayhill. A small knot tightened in Kayla's stomach. They'd had a training last month about government checks, too. Just because it looks official doesn't mean it is, the trainer had warned. Scammers use real logos, real addresses. Always verify large checks, especially when they're being cashed instead of deposited. Do you have an account with us? Kayla asked. Doris straightened a little. Yes, ma'am. Been here a long time. Kayla glanced at the screen, fingers already flying. Name? Doris Hill. The account popped up, small balance, regular Social Security deposits, a few debit card purchases from local grocery stores, and the pharmacy. Account open for 12 years. No overdrafts, no flags. Kayla exhaled just a tiny bit. And what would you like to do with the funds? She asked. Deposit to your account or cash back? I like most of it in cash, Doris replied. I got folks I need to pay for work on my house. And I want a cashier's check for some of it, if that's all right. Kayla hesitated. Large cash withdrawals carried their own warnings. Could we do most of it in a cashier's check or deposit? She suggested. Just for safety. That's a lot of cash to carry. Doris nodded. I said, I want some in a cashier's check. The rest I'll deposit after I pay some folks. I got it worked out. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. This wasn't a whim. Kayla's eyes scanned the check again. $8,300. For property damage settlement. It sounded legitimate enough. The city's logo was printed cleanly in the top left corner. Still, something inside her prickled. Maybe it was the combination of the large amount and the age of the woman standing before her. Or maybe it was the last staff meeting where the branch manager had shown them grainy photos of supposed customers cashing fraudulent checks. Always trust your gut, he had said. If something seems off, escalate, escalate, escalate. It's your job to protect the bank. Kayla turned slightly to look toward the assistant manager's desk, but he was engrossed with a customer, head bent, phone in hand. The lobby had begun to fill. Someone at the next window was raising his voice slightly, arguing about fees. Don't be a bother, she thought. Handle it yourself. You're trained for this. Do you have your ID, Ms. Hill? She asked. Doris was already reaching for it. Right here. She produced a slightly worn state ID card. The plastic edges rubbed cloudy. Kayla compared the name, then the face. The photo showed a younger version of the woman before her, but the eyes, the curve of the mouth matched. She checked the date of birth. Account data aligned. Her training manual's invisible ghost hovered in her mind, flipping pages. Security features, she murmured to herself, scanning the check. Watermark? Check. Microprinting? It looked right, but she was no expert. She lightly ran her thumb across the signature line. It felt normal enough. Have you cashed checks from the city before? She asked, stalling. Not like this, Doris replied. This here is for my house. Water main broke, ruined my kitchen. It's been a whole mess. City finally came through. I see, Kayla said, though in truth she didn't, not really. Her last apartment had a leaky faucet once. Maintenance fixed it the same day. She had never lived in a place where the government breaking something meant it stayed broken. Do you mind if I verify this with my manager? She asked. Doris frowned just slightly. Verify? The city office gave it to me. Yesterday. I understand, Kayla said quickly, smile flickering a little. It's just our policy with larger checks, especially from third parties. We want to make sure everything is safe for you and for us. Doris pressed her lips together. It wasn't the first time she'd heard that tone, that careful sweetness layered over suspicion. She could hear her mother's voice from decades ago. People talk soft when they think they might be about to do you wrong. If you must, she said quietly. Kayla stood. I'll be right back. It'll just take a moment. She took the check over to the side counter, near the printer. She could see her assistant manager from the corner of her eye, still tied up. She hesitated. She knew she could call the city's public works number printed on the check to confirm, but she also knew how these calls sometimes went. Endless hold music, bouncing from one department to another. The line was growing by the minute. Her other co-workers had their own customers, No one looked free. She pulled up the internal fraud prevention intranet instead, searching for City of Brookhaven settlement checks. There were no alerts, no scam bulletins. She typed Water Main Settlement Brookhaven Fraud into the search bar of her browser. Nothing relevant popped up in the first few results. Behind her, she could feel Doris's gaze on her back, steady as a weight. She could hear the trainer's voice again. If something feels off and you can't verify it, err on the side of caution. The bank will always support you disciplining or denying a questionable transaction. They will not always support you if you approve a fraudulent one. The fear flared again, being the one who let a scam slip through, who cost the branch thousands. 6 months in, and she was still on probation. She needed this job. Her student loans weren't going to pay themselves. When Kayla returned to the window, the check felt heavier in her hand. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hill," she said, keeping her voice gentle. "I can't accept this check. It just doesn't look right to me." Doris blinked. "What do you mean it don't look right? The city wrote it. That's their address, their logo." "It might be," Kayla replied. "But sometimes scammers replicate those things. And this settlement amount, the type of check, it's unusual. And you're asking for a lot of cash, which is a red flag as well." Doris slowly set both hands on the counter, her fingers splaying a little as if she needed the contact to stay steady. "I ain't no scammer," she said. The words came out quiet, but each one had weight. "That money is mine." Kayla swallowed. "I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, Ms. Hill, but we have to be very careful. Our policy—" "Baby, I've been coming to this bank since before you knew how to spell it," Doris said, a brittle humor in her voice. "You done seen my little checks go in month after month. All this time I've been legit. Now, the one time I bring in something bigger, suddenly I'm suspicious." There it was. The thing Kayla had been trying not to look at directly. How different it might feel if the customer was one of the young professionals who strolled in wearing expensive headphones and casual confidence. Or the older man in the golf shirt who always bragged about his rental properties. Or someone who looked like her own parents. Her face warmed. "It's not about you," she started. "It's about the check." Doris's eyes flicked from Kayla's face to the paper, then back again. "It's about what I look like holding the check," she said softly. "Be honest." Kayla's chest tightened. For a split second, she wanted to push past her fear, to trust the old woman's steady gaze and 12-year account history more than the abstract warnings in her training manual. But fear is a powerful editor. It rewrote the moment in her mind. Newspaper headlines about bank fraud, an angry manager asking why she didn't follow procedure, a meeting in a glass-walled office where someone from corporate used the word termination with too much practiced sympathy. "I'm sorry," Kayla repeated, clinging to the phrase like a life raft. "I'm not able to process this. You need to go back to the issuing office and have them reissue or confirm it. There's, a problem with the check." "What problem?" Doris demanded. "Point at it. Tell me what you see." Kayla looked down at the check, heart pounding faster. The longer she stood here, the more the line grew. A man 3 spots back was already checking his watch impatiently. "I can't discuss all the specifics," she said, defaulting to the vague phrases they'd been given in training. It's not something we can accept. I'm going to mark it as void." Before Doris could fully process what she'd heard, Kayla picked up her stamp, pressed it onto the ink pad, and brought it down. Except her hand shook just slightly, and the stamp missed the signature line by an inch, hitting the margin instead with a crooked void. "Wait," Doris started, shock making her voice crack. Whether it was the sound or the heat flushing her own cheeks, Kayla moved too fast. She picked up the check with one hand and, in a gesture meant to show finality, authority, something, she tore it cleanly down the middle. The sound was loud in the hushed lobby. A raw, ripping protest. For a second, no one moved. The check hung from Kayla's hands in 2 limp pieces. Doris's mouth was open, but no words came out. Her fingers curled slowly against the counter as if trying to grasp something that wasn't there. You tore it," she whispered at last. Kayla's stomach dropped. Somewhere deep inside, a voice screamed, "What did you just do?" "We can't reuse it," she stammered. "It wasn't valid. I had to void." "You tore it," Doris repeated, louder this time. "That was my check. You tore up my check. A man further down the line muttered, "Damn," under his breath. The young couple exchanged a glance. The teller at the next window shot Kayla a wide-eyed look. Kayla swallowed, throat dry. She set the 2 pieces of the check on the counter between them, as if that would somehow help. "You can get the city to reissue," she began. "Do you know how long it took me to get that?" Doris interrupted. Tears shone at the corners of her eyes, but they did not fall yet. They hovered, stubborn. 3 years. 3 years of calling and writing and sitting in waiting rooms. And you just tore it like it was nothing. "Ma'am, if it's legitimate, they'll give you another," Kayla said, hearing how weak it sounded as she spoke. "It's just, this is our policy. I was protecting." "Protecting who?" Doris shot back. "It ain't me." "Sure ain't me." The assistant manager, hearing the raised voices, hurried over, tie slightly askew. "What's going on?" he asked briskly. Kayla felt like a child summoned to the principal's office. "There's a settlement check from the city," she said. "For a large amount. It looked suspicious. I didn't feel comfortable cashing it. I avoided it." Doris turned to him. "She tore it up," she said. Her voice was steady again, but it had become a different sort of steady. The kind that came after a storm, when everything was still but nothing was in its right place. The manager glanced at the torn pieces, then at the screen with Doris's account. He frowned. His hand went up to his tie, smoothing it unconsciously. "We do have policies for verifying checks over $5,000, he said carefully. "But usually that involves calling the issuer, getting confirmation, documenting steps taken." "She didn't call nobody," Doris said. "She just decided I looked suspicious and tore up my money." "It wasn't about how you looked," Kayla protested weakly, but she could feel the lie in her own mouth. "It was the amount, and you wanted—" The manager cut in quickly. "Ms. Hill, I'm very sorry. This may have been mishandled." Kayla's head snapped toward him. "You told us to err on the side of caution," she blurted. "You said the bank would support." "I said err on the side of caution," he replied sharply. "Not destroy a customer's property without proper verification." Property. The word landed between them, solid and undeniable, like the check had been an object with weight and value that Kayla had shredded. Doris closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "I want my check," she said. "I want my money, and I want you to write down both your names." "Of course," the manager said quickly. He scribbled on a card and held it out. Doris looked at it, then slipped it into her purse without reading. Her fingers trembled now, the tears finally spilling over and tracking slowly down her cheeks. "Ms. Hill," Kayla started. Doris raised a hand. It wasn't rude. It wasn't angry. It was simply final. "You had a choice," she said, "and you made it. I got no more to say to you today." She gathered the 2 halves of the check with care, as if the torn paper could still be convinced to hold itself together. She folded them once, twice, tucked them back into the battered envelope, and walked away from the counter. Her back was still straight. Her steps were measured, but every line of her body radiated a tired hurt that made Kayla feel suddenly, horribly small. No one spoke as Doris left the branch. The automatic doors whispered open to let her pass, then slid shut again, sealing the cool air inside like nothing had happened. Kayla's hands shook as she returned to her stool. "Next customer," she managed. Her shift moved on, the way time does even when you want it to freeze so you can undo the last 5 minutes. Deposits, withdrawals, questions about balances. People came and went. Her co-workers shot her looks, some sympathetic, some wary. At 12:15, her phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Lunch. She grabbed her jacket and escaped out the side door into the sunlight, sucking in air like she'd been underwater. The street felt louder now. The honking, the chatter, the distant wail of siren. She walked without thinking, just wanting distance between herself and the fluorescent lighting. Her favorite food truck was parked half a block down, serving tacos to a small crowd. She got in line automatically, mind replaying the scene from that morning over and over. The sound of the check ripping, the look on the woman's face, the manager's words, mishandled. She dragged her hands through her hair. Lost in thought, she barely registered the 2 women in front of her pointing up excitedly. "There he is," one squealed. "I told you. They put it up already." Kayla followed their gaze. Across the street, above the bank's main entrance, the new billboard shone bright in the midday sun. The glossy image stretched nearly the width of the building. She could see it clearly now. On the left side, 3 kids in soccer uniforms grinned, grass stains on their knees. On the right side, the familiar faces of several Riverfield employees smiled in their matching blue shirts. In the very center stood a tall black man in a tailored navy suit. He had his arm around an older woman, her gray hair styled in a neat halo, her lavender blouse crisp against the soft background. They were both looking at the camera with a quiet pride that felt different from the forced sheer of the other ads. White text arched above them in bold letters. Local roots, lasting impact. Smaller text below read, community partner and financial advisor Marcus Hill with his mother, Doris. Kayla's breath stopped. For a moment, the world narrowed to that one image. The man in the suit, the woman beside him, the name that had just typed itself across her mind. Doris. She didn't need to zoom in to know. The lavender blouse, the curve of the jaw, the eyes that now stared down at the street with a warmth she suddenly felt she had no right to look at. It was her, the woman whose check she had torn, the woman who had stood at her window less than 3 hours ago, asking not for charity, but for what was hers. And the man beside her, Marcus Hill, had his name in smaller print along the bottom corner, where corporate commitments and partnerships were listed. Board member, Brookhaven Youth Mentoring Program. Riverfield Community Bank, financial literacy partner. The man whose photo now loomed above her workplace, as if he were personally endorsing the trustworthiness of the bank that had just told his mother she looked like a criminal. Kayla's stomach twisted so hard she had to grab the food truck's metal railing to steady herself. You had a choice, and you made it. The memory of Doris's voice slammed into her chest. Shame burned up her neck and into her face, hot enough to make her eyes sting. Of course, she thought wildly. Of course something like this would happen here, in this city where everyone seemed to know everyone, where one wrong move could ricochet through circles she didn't even know existed. She barely heard the person at the truck window asking for her order. When they repeated the question, she stammered something about not being hungry after all and stepped out of line, ignoring the muttered annoyance from a man behind her. She crossed the street slowly, staring up at the billboard as if it might offer some explanation, some way to reframe what she had done. It did not. The smiling photo stayed fixed, unmoved by her silent panic. She remembered now, in flashes, the internal memo they'd all received 2 weeks ago. Exciting news! Our new community partnership campaign goes live this month, featuring local leaders and their family members. Be on the lookout for the faces of Brookhaven that help make Riverfield strong. She hadn't opened the attached file. Too many emails, too little time. She'd skimmed the subject line, rolled her eyes at another attempt to make the bank feel like a family, and gone back to balancing her drawer. Now she thought, if I had just looked, if I had just read, if I had just... Her brain kept grabbing at small ifs to avoid the big one. If I had just treated that woman like her story mattered as much as my fear. Across the street, the bank's glass doors reflected the billboard with a ghostly shimmer. The main entrance looked like a mouth under the smiling faces, about to speak. Kayla heard footsteps and turned. Her assistant manager, Mark, was striding toward her, tie flapping in the slight wind. You saw it, he asked, breathless. She nodded once, her throat too tight for words. I just got off the phone with corporate, he said, rubbing his forehead. They're thrilled about the campaign. Authentic stories of local resilience and partnership, they said, and I was like, about that. His laugh was strained, almost hysterical. We need to talk, he said. Inside. Now, in the small glass-walled office off the lobby, they sat facing each other like two people who had stumbled into an interrogation room by mistake. I've already logged the incident, Mark said. We need documentation when something like this happens. And this is bigger than a routine complaint now. She's on the billboard, Kayla said numbly. He nodded. And her son is one of their golden boys. He does those financial literacy seminars for the bank. He's been in the newsletters. He's tight with upper management. You know what that means. It means they'll care, Kayla said bitterly. Because she's connected. He flinched a little at that. They should care regardless, he said. But they don't, she replied. Not like this. He looked away. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just explaining why we're going to have visitors from corporate breathing down our necks. Kayla stared at her hands. I thought I was doing my job, she said quietly. We were told to be cautious, to watch for fraud. You've given us slides with pictures of older folks being scammed. Remember? You said, protect your elderly clients. That meant help them, Mark said, not shred their settlement checks. I didn't shred it, she snapped, then immediately felt ridiculous. I mean, I did shred it, basically. I tore it. I felt like I had to act decisive. I thought tearing it and stamping it was how we showed authority. That it was final. You misapplied policy, he said. His tone softened with the words, but the content didn't. You know the right procedure. You're supposed to escalate, call the issuer, document the steps, involve a second signature. You skipped straight to the end. Because I was afraid, she said, surprising herself with the bluntness. All those trainings, all the stories about people getting fired for letting fraud through. They're always telling us how one mistake can cost the bank tens of thousands. How the first line of defense. You plant that kind of fear in someone, and the first time something makes them nervous, they lash out. She swallowed. I lashed out, and she took the hit. Mark sighed. That may all be true, he said. But try telling that to corporate. Kayla looked up. What's going to happen to me? I don't know yet, he answered honestly. I've been told to gather all the information. They'll want your written statement. And Ms. Hill called while you were at lunch. She's coming back tomorrow. With her son. Of course she was. Kayla closed her eyes for a second. She pictured that billboard again, the two of them smiling under the slogan about local roots. Do I have to be here? She asked. Yes, Mark said. They specifically said they want you present for the conversation. Transparency, they called it. Also, they're worried about optics. Optics, she repeated, the word sour on her tongue. Because God forbid the bank that put their faces on a billboard be seen mistreating them. Mark didn't argue. He simply pressed his lips together, then slid a pen and a form across the desk. Write down exactly what happened, he said. Every detail you remember. The questions you asked. The steps you did or didn't take. And if you have anything to say about why you did what you did, say that too. Sometimes context matters. She stared at the blank lines. Her hand hovered over the paper. Why I did what I did, she repeated softly. Images flickered in her mind. The trainer's warnings, the PowerPoint slides, the security memos. Her own mother's stories about bouncing checks when she was younger, how embarrassed she had been. The way her father had taught her to fear being that kind of person, the one who couldn't be trusted with money. And then, layered over all of that, something she didn't want to name, a lifetime of quiet messages about who looks like they belong and who looks like they might be trouble. She began to write. By the time she finished, her lunch break was a memory. She wrote about the training, the flags in her mind, the fear of making a mistake. She tried, haltingly, to admit that she had reacted to more than just the check in front of her. When she handed the statement to Mark, he read it in silence. You're honest, he said finally. That's something. Will it save my job? She asked. I don't know, he repeated. But it might make a difference in what happens next. For you. And for her. Corporate likes to talk about learning opportunities. Maybe they'll actually mean it this time. He stood. Go back to your station. Try to get through the rest of your shift. We'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. Tomorrow came faster than anyone wanted. Doris didn't sleep well that night. The image of the check tearing and half replayed on the backs of her eyes whenever she closed them. The shame of strangers watching. The indignity of being treated like a suspect after a lifetime of trying to do everything by the book. Her daughter-in-law, Tasha, made tea for her when she called, voice shaking. That's not right, Ma, Tasha had said. You don't deserve that. Do you want to go down there right now? No, Doris had said. Not tonight. I'm too tired to be that angry. You shouldn't have to be angry at all, Tasha replied. I've been black in this country a long time, Doris said, trying to sound wry. It comes with the package. After they hung up, she sat in her living room in the dark for a long time, the torn check on the coffee table before her like a crime scene. The edges where it had been ripped were jagged and white, the ink sliced midward. She finally called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Ma. Everything okay? I was going to call you tonight anyway. They tore my check, she said. There was a pause. What? She told him, voice trembling only once. She told him about the young teller, about the questions, about the way the check had been ripped in two without anyone even bothering to pick up a phone and verify. Marcus listened, his silence heavy, measured. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. What bank? He asked, though he already suspected. Riverfield on Jefferson, she said. Your bank. He closed his eyes. He could see the campaign photos in his mind. The photographer's jokes, the marketing manager's excitement. We want to highlight real families, she had said. Real stories of resilience. My bank, he repeated quietly. Don't you take that on yourself, Doris said quickly. You didn't do it. No, he replied. But my face is on their building. My name is in their brochures. They use me to say, look who trusts us. So when they disrespect you, it's different. What are we going to do? She asked. We're going to make sure they see exactly who they disrespected, he said. His voice was calm, but there was a current in it that reminded her of his father when he was truly, deeply angry. I'll clear my morning. We're going in together. I don't want you to risk your job, she warned. If my job depends on me staying quiet while they mistreat you, it's not a job I want, he answered. Get some rest if you can. I'll pick you up at 9. The next day, the sky was a clear, cold blue, as if the weather had decided to make everything look crisp for the confrontation. Marcus pulled up outside Doris's house in his silver sedan, stepping out in a gray suit that was less formal than the one on the billboard, but still sharp. He hugged his mother carefully, mindful of her sensitive shoulder. You ready? He asked. She patted his arm. I was born ready, she said. Then she looked up at him, and her eyes softened. You sure you are? He smiled without humor. Let's find out. The drive to the bank felt shorter this time. Doris watched the city slide past. The church where she'd sung in the choir for 30 years. The park where Marcus had learned to ride a bike. The corner store that had changed owners 5 times but still sold the same too sweet lemonade. When they pulled onto Jefferson, the big blue letters of the bank's name came into view first. Then the billboard. Marcus slowed the car, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. I hadn't seen it up yet, he said. Doris blinked up at the giant image of herself and her son. For the first time, the sight did not fill her with the pride it had when they first told her about the campaign. It filled her with something more complicated, a sense of being used, of being projected larger than life while being treated as small in reality. Well, she murmured, ain't that something? He parked, and they walked toward the entrance together. Passers-by glanced up at the billboard, then back at them, then did double takes. A man with a coffee cup paused, staring between the billboard and Marcus, recognition dawning. Hey, he said, pointing. That's you, right? On the thing. Marcus gave him a polite nod. Unfortunately, yes, he replied. Inside the bank, the same tiled floor and climate-controlled air greeted them. The same posters, the same scent of coffee. But the atmosphere was different now. It vibrated with a quiet, nervous energy. Mark met them in the lobby, his smile strained. Mr. Hill, Ms. Hill, he said, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. I'm Mark Thompson, the assistant branch manager. I spoke with you on the phone, Mr. Hill. They shook. Doris allowed herself the smallest of sardonic thoughts. Yesterday, I couldn't get anyone to call anything. Today, they call on my son before breakfast. Thank you for seeing us, Marcus said, his voice even. I'd like to speak to whoever is in charge of this branch. And I want the teller who handled my mother's check present as well. Of course, Mark said quickly. Our branch manager, Mr. Hernandez, is on a call with regional leadership right now, but he'll join us shortly. Please, if you'll come with me to the conference room, we can start. The conference room was a glass box with a long table and 2 bright lighting. A bowl of wrapped candies sat in the center, untouched. Kayla stood near the far wall, hands clasped so tightly in front of her that her knuckles were white. She looked smaller without the teller counter between them, just a young woman in a navy blouse and slacks, her eyes ringed with the fatigue of a sleepless night. When Doris walked in, Kayla's gaze dropped to the table. She forced herself to look up again. Ms. Hill, she said. Mr. Hill. Hello, Marcus replied. His tone carried no warmth, but neither did it flare with obvious hostility. It was cooler than polite, the sort of tone one uses with someone whose actions are under review. They took seats on one side of the table, mother and son aligned shoulder to shoulder. Mark and Kayla sat opposite. An empty chair at the head of the table waited for the branch manager. "First, I want to say how deeply sorry we are for what happened yesterday," Mark began. He trailed off as the door opened and another man entered, a tall, middle-aged Latino man in a crisp white shirt and tie. His dark hair was swept back, and his expression was solemn. "Mr. Hill, Ms. Hill," he said. "I'm Daniel Hernandez, the branch manager. I want to echo what Mark said. We are very sorry. This is not the experience we want any of our customers to have, let alone someone who has been banking with us as long as you have, Ms. Hill." Doris inclined her head slightly. She said. "I've heard sorry a lot of ways in my life, Mr. Hernandez. I'm listening to see which kind this is." He didn't flinch at the words. If anything, his respect for her deepened. "I understand," he said. "We've reviewed our teller's account of what happened, and I'd like to hear yours. Then we can talk about how we make this right." "Make it right," Marcus repeated. "That's a tall order." "It is," Hernandez agreed. "But we're going to try." He nodded to Doris. She told the story again, this time with more controlled precision, laying out each step like evidence in a case. She described her years banking there, the account history, the settlement check, the questions that shifted from cautious to accusatory, the way the teller had torn the check without making a single phone call. As she spoke, Kayla's shame settled around her like a physical weight. Hearing the events through Doris's voice made everything sound worse, but also clearer. There was no room left to tell herself she had just been following policy. Policy had not told her to rip. Policy had told her to verify. When Doris finished, silence fell for a moment, thick and heavy. "Thank you, Ms. Hill," Hernandez said. "Your account aligns with what we've heard, with some additional details that matter." He looked at Kayla. "Ms. Jensen, is there anything you'd like to say?" Kayla swallowed. Her heart thudded painfully tight against her ribs. "Yes," she said, forcing her voice to be steady. "I'd like to apologize. Truly. Ms. Hill, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. You were right. I had a choice, and I made the wrong one. I let fear and assumptions guide me instead of respecting you and taking the time to verify properly." Doris watched her, face unreadable. "I thought I was protecting the bank," Kayla continued. "But what I really did was harm you. I didn't trust your word or your history as a customer. I didn't consider what it would mean to tear up something you had worked so hard for. It was wrong. There's no excuse." Marcus tilted his head. "You mentioned fear," he said. "Fear of what? Exactly?" She met his gaze. It would have been easy to say fraud and leave it at that. Easy and cowardly. "Fear of being the one who let a scam through," she said slowly. "We get so much training about fraud, about how one mistake can cost the bank thousands. And I've seen in quieter ways how certain customers get more scrutiny than others." She hesitated, then pushed herself forward. "Customers who look like your mother. Older, not wealthy, black." The word landed in the room like a stone thrown into still water. Ripples went out, unavoidable. "I grew up hearing messages too," she went on. "Not just from training, from family, media, you name it, about who looks trustworthy and who doesn't. Yesterday, instead of challenging that, I leaned into it. That's on me." Hernandez's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. "And when I saw the amount on the check and that you wanted some in cash," she said, turning back to Doris, instead of asking more questions like, "What is the money for? What is your plan?" I assumed something was off. I thought I was being vigilant. I was being biased. I was being disrespectful. I can't undo what I did. I can only tell you that I understand it was wrong, and that I'm committed to doing the work to make sure I never do it again." She didn't say, "Please forgive me." That felt too heavy, too soon. Forgiveness was not something she had a right to ask for. Not yet. Marcus watched her for a long moment. Then he turned to Hernandez. "What is the bank going to do?" he asked. "Beyond apologies. We've already contacted the city of Brookhaven," Hernandez said. "They're issuing a replacement check, and we've arranged for expedited processing. You won't have to wait weeks or months, Ms. Hill. As soon as it arrives, likely within 2 business days, we will cash it or deposit it or issue cashier's checks however you prefer. And we will not charge you any fees related to it. That's the bare minimum. Agreed, Marcus said. That's logistics. What about the harm done? My mother lost sleep over this. She was humiliated in front of a lobby full of people. She was told, in effect, that her word and her history here meant nothing compared to your teller's fear. How do you repair that? Hernandez didn't look away. We're speaking with our regional office about a formal apology letter and compensation beyond the check amount, he said. Something equivalent to damages for the emotional distress caused. We don't need hush money, Doris cut in sharply. Don't insult us. I didn't mean it like that, Hernandez said quickly. I mean acknowledging that we caused harm and trying to make amends in a tangible way. Marcus leaned back slightly. And beyond us? He asked. Because if this happened to my mother, it's probably happened to others who don't have a son on your billboard. What systemic changes are you going to make? Kayla felt a cold realization wash over her. He was right. The only reason they were in this room, with this level of attention, was because his face had become part of the bank's public image. Hernandez nodded slowly. We are required to do bias and inclusion training annually, he said. But it's clear that whatever we've been doing has not been enough. I've already spoken with regional leadership about bringing in an outside consultant to design training that specifically addresses how bias shows up in fraud prevention decisions. And we're reviewing our policies to clarify steps and limits of discretion. Tellers should not be destroying checks, period, unless there's clear evidence of forgery and the customer agrees. That will be put in writing. That's a start, Marcus said. But there's another layer. You all are using my mother's image to say, look how much this bank cares about people like her. Meanwhile, in practice, she's treated like a risk, not like a valued client. That's not just hypocrisy. That's exploitation. The word hung in the air, heavy and accurate. I can't argue with you, Hernandez said quietly. When corporate proposed the campaign, I thought it was a great idea. But this has shown me that banners and billboards mean nothing if our day-to-day interactions don't match them. I've raised that with them. Honestly, they're worried about the PR fallout, but I'm more concerned about the trust we've broken with you, and likely with others. Marcus glanced at his mother. What do you want? He asked her. With the billboard. With everything. Doris didn't answer right away. She turned to look through the glass wall of the conference room, where she could see the faint reflection of the billboard outside, mirrored in the front windows. She saw her own face up there, smiling, hand on her son's arm. The slogan about roots and impact. I wanted to be proud when I saw that, she said. Thought, look at that. Little poor girl from Oak Ridge, up there big as life, saying we made it through some hard times, and now we got something to show for it. She took a breath. Yesterday, sitting on my couch with that torn check, I looked at that ad in my head and thought, they using me. Using my story to make them look good, while they treat me like I'm stealing from them. She looked at Hernandez. So first thing, I want that billboard down until you earn it. Not just for me, but for every other old black woman who might walk in here and get that same look. If you want to put a picture of me back up someday, do it after you fix what's broken. Not before. Hernandez nodded slowly. We can talk to corporate about that, he said. It will take some time, but I'll push for it. And second, Doris continued, I want to know what you're going to do for the folks who don't have fancy titles or campaigns. I got a son who can sit in this room and say big words like systemic and exploitation. She gave Marcus a faint smile. Not everybody got that, but they still got dignity. I want you to post your new policies where people can see them. Make it clear what steps you take with checks, what your staff can and can't do. So if something like this happens again, that customer can point to your own paper and say, no, that ain't right. That's a powerful suggestion, Hernandez said. We can absolutely do that. She looked at Kayla. And you, she said. What are you going to do? Kayla felt the question land on her like a weight she had been expecting, but still wasn't ready to lift. I already asked to be included in whatever training is developed, she said. Not just as a participant, but as someone who can speak about this experience. How fear and bias twisted my judgment. I want other tellers to hear about it, not as some abstract incident, but as something that hurt a real person whose story they can't see just by looking at them. She took a breath. I've also found some books and articles about bias and racism, especially in financial institutions. I'm reading them. I know reading isn't enough, but it's a place to start. And I'm going to volunteer at the financial literacy workshops Mr. Hill does, if he'll let me. I figure if I can put some of my time into actually helping people navigate money systems instead of just guarding them, maybe that's one step. Marcus studied her. He saw the fear there still, fear for her job, for her reputation, but he also saw something else, a willingness to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You're going to make mistakes, he said. We all do. But what you did yesterday, that can't happen again. Not to my mother, not to anyone. I know, she said. I hear you. Doris leaned back in her chair. The room was very quiet now. She could hear faintly the murmur of customers in the lobby, the beeping of a scanner at a teller station. I'm angry, she said, and I probably will be for a while. I'm tired too. Tired of having to explain why the way people treat me is wrong. Tired of having to be polite even when I've been disrespected, because if I raise my voice, suddenly I'm the problem. She looked at Kayla. You hurt me. You made me feel small in a place I helped keep open all these years with my deposits, little as they are. I don't forgive you yet. I don't know when or if I will. But I hear that you're trying to understand what you did. That matters. Kayla nodded, eyes shining. And you, she said to Hernandez and Mark. You got work to do. Don't just do some training and send out another email talking about how you value diversity. That's just pretty words. Do the hard work. Change how you measure your staff. If you only ever praise them for catching fraud and never for treating people with respect, guess which one I'm going to focus on? Hernandez almost smiled at that. You'd make a good consultant, he said. Pay me then, she replied dryly. I got a kitchen to fix. A ripple of weary laughter moved around the table, easing the tension, if only slightly. They spent the next half hour discussing concrete steps, timelines, follow-ups. Marcus agreed to review the new training modules when they were drafted. Doris agreed, reluctantly, to let the bank know when the replacement check arrived so they could ensure there were no more hurdles. When they left, walking back through the lobby, several employees glanced up. Some looked away quickly. Others held their gaze, offering small nods that could have meant anything from apology to solidarity. Outside, the billboard still loomed above them, the larger-than-life image of who they were supposed to represent to the world. They going to take it down? Doris asked, shading her eyes. If they have any sense, Marcus said. At least until they deserve it. She snorted. You know, it's kind of funny, she said. Yesterday, that picture would have made me puff my chest out. Today, it just makes me shake my head. He looked up. Do you want him to take it down completely? Or, he hesitated. Or, do you ever want to see yourself up there again, once they've actually changed something? She was quiet for a long time. The wind tugged at the ends of her scarf. A car horn blared in the distance. A child laughed near the bus stop. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe someday. Not for them. For the people looking up. Knowing a woman like me got to see some wrongs righted, not just suffer them. He nodded. Whatever you want, we'll push for it. A week later, the billboard came down. For a day, the side of the bank looked naked, just a blank metal frame reflecting the sky. People noticed. In a city where not much changed from one week to the next, a missing billboard was enough to spark questions. Rumors flew. Had the campaign ended early? Had there been some scandal? Did the bank decide they weren't doing community outreach anymore? Those who asked the right people got pieces of truth. Enough to piece together a story about a woman whose image had become a symbol before the institution was ready to actually treat her with the respect that symbol implied. Some were outraged on her behalf. Some shrugged. That's just how it is, they said. Banks don't change. But inside the Jefferson branch, something did begin to shift. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't pretty. The new training sessions were long and uncomfortable. Tellers heard stories about customers who had been turned away, questioned, humiliated. They heard about redlining and payday loans and how financial institutions had profited off people who looked like the folks standing in their lobby every day. Some staff rolled their eyes. Some squirmed. Some realized, with a prickle of shame, but they had nodded along to discriminatory comments from customers and coworkers without pushing back. Kayla spoke at one of the sessions, voice trembling at first, then gaining strength. She told the story of the day she tore up a check, of seeing the face from that torn moment smiling down from a billboard. She didn't paint herself as a monster or a martyr. She painted herself as what she was, a person who had messed up badly, who had let fear and bias override common sense and courtesy. "I don't get a medal for admitting this," she told the room. "I get to keep my job because Ms. Hill and her son decided they wanted change more than they wanted revenge. I owe it to them, and to every one of you, to make sure that mercy means something, that it turns into better action, not just better PR." Some of her coworkers came up afterward to thank her. Some avoided her eyes, reminded too much of their own mistakes. At the next financial literacy workshop, held in the community center's brightly painted multipurpose room, Marcus stood in front of a dozen teenage boys and girls, explaining compound interest and interest rates with the patience of someone who had learned those concepts under much heavier pressure. At the back of the room, Kayla passed out worksheets and helped a shy girl calculate how long it would take to save for a car if she put aside $20 a week. During a break, Marcus came over. "Did you ever picture yourself doing this?" he asked her quietly. "Not really," she admitted, "but I'm starting to think I should have. Might have made me better at my job from the beginning if I'd started here, seeing what it looks like when banks actually help people instead of just guard against them." He nodded. "Systems are complicated," he said. "People like to make them sound like machines, but they're just made up of a lot of human choices. Some good, some not. You made a bad one. Now you're trying to stack some better ones on top. That's how change happens, if it happens at all." "Is Ms. Hill still angry with me?" she asked. "Probably," he said honestly. "But she's watching, and she's listening to what I tell her about what you're doing. She may not say it, but it matters to her." Kayla nodded, throat tight. Later that week, when the replacement check arrived, Doris went back to the bank. She walked up to the counter, where Kayla waited, nerve-wracked but ready. "Ms. Hill," she said, "it's good to see you." "We'll see how good it is in a minute," Doris replied, but there was a flicker of something almost like humor in her eyes. They processed the transaction together this time, step by step. Kayla explained each action, each verification, each phone call to the city's office. Doris watched, listening, occasionally asking, "Why you do it that way?" And Kayla answered, "Because this is the part that actually protects you, not just us." When the cash and cashier's check were finally in Doris's hands, there were no theatrics, no speeches, just a quiet nod. "You did it right this time," she said. "Remember this feeling. So next time some old lady comes in with more money than you expect, you treat her like a person first. Not a problem." "Yes, ma'am," Kayla said. As Doris turned to leave, she paused. "I heard you've been talking at those trainings," she said, "making yourself the example." Kayla flushed. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Doris said. "Embarrassment is a powerful teacher. So is telling the truth about yourself." She considered. "You got a lot more years ahead of you than I do. Use them better from now on." "I will," Kayla said. She meant it. Outside, the metal frame where the billboard had been was still empty. But there were rumors that a new campaign would go up someday, one that had been shaped by more voices, more stories, and more honest reflection. Doris didn't know if she wanted her face on it again. Some days she thought yes. Some days she thought no. What mattered more to her now was what happened inside that building. A month after the replacement check, her kitchen floor was level again. New tiles shone under her feet, not fancy but clean, sturdy. The draft under the back door was gone. The crack in the ceiling had been patched and painted. When her granddaughter came over, she snapped pictures on her phone. "Look at this," she exclaimed. "Nana, your kitchen looks like those renovation shows." "It's just fixed," Doris said, but her smile was wide. One Sunday after church, Marcus sat at her new kitchen table while she fried chicken and okra, moving with the ease of someone who had cooked in tight spaces all her life. "You hear they still don't have a new billboard up at the bank?" he asked between bites. "I noticed," she said. "Maybe they decided to leave it blank as a reminder." "Of what?" "That they still got more to learn." She flipped a piece of chicken. "You know, I've been thinking, if they come asking again about using my picture, I might say yes. But this time, not just me smiling with you." "What would you want?" he asked. She thought for a long moment, spatula hovering. A picture of the teller class, she said. A bunch of them, all different kinds, standing behind the counter with folks on the other side who look like the whole town, not just the ones who already feel like they belong. And the words under it would say something like, "We're still learning. Hold us to it." Marcus laughed. "You should trademark that," he said. "I didn't get paid enough for that first ad," she replied. "If they want my creativity, that's extra." They both laughed this time, the sound warm and rich, filling the kitchen. Later that week, a letter arrived in her mailbox from the bank's regional office. It was printed on thick paper, full of formal language, corporate phrasing about regret and commitment to improvement. But one handwritten note stood out at the bottom in a different pen. "Ms. Hill," it read, "I'm grateful that you spoke up. Your story is already changing how we do things. It shouldn't have taken hurting you to get us here, but now that we're here, I'm going to keep pushing. Thank you for holding us accountable. D. Hernandez." She read it twice, then stuck it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Not because she trusted every word, but because she liked being reminded that her voice, small as it sometimes felt, had weight. One afternoon, months later, she took the number 12 bus downtown again. Leon greeted her as always. "On time?" she asked him playfully. "Always, if I know you might be riding," he said. This time, when she got off near the bank, she looked up deliberately at the side of the building. The frame was no longer empty. A new billboard spread across it in deep blues and warm golds. There were no individual stars in this one, no single face in the center. Instead, it was a collage. A woman in a wheelchair at an ATM, a young man opening a savings account with his father, a small business owner in front of her shop, a group of bank employees at a community cleanup. In the corner, in smaller font, were the words, "We make mistakes. We listen. We grow. Banking should work for everyone." Doris stared at it for a long moment. Then she snorted. "Not bad," she said to herself. "Could use my tagline, though." She went inside, not because she needed anything urgent, but because she could, because it was her bank as much as anyone else's. Kayla wasn't at the teller window that day. She had moved to a new role in the back office, helping implement some of the very policies they had discussed. But another young teller smiled when she walked up. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hill," he said, glancing at her screen. "Anything I can help you with today?" "Not today," she said. "Just checking in, making sure y'all still remember who I am." He grinned. "Hard to forget, ma'am." She nodded, satisfied, and headed for the door. Outside, the sun caught the new billboard just right, making the colors glow. Then a cloud passed, and the lights softened, leaving it just another part of the cityscape. Doris liked it better that way. Less shining symbol, more quiet reminder. As she walked down the block toward the bus stop, she thought of that day months ago when her check had torn, when she had felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She thought of the weight of humiliation, the sharp taste of anger. Then she thought of this day, the steady floor under her feet, the memory of pushing back and being heard, even if the listening was imperfect and overdue. Banks took people's money and lent it, invested it, grew it. But people, she thought, invested themselves in banks too. Their trust, their stories, their hard-earned understanding of what was fair and what wasn't. She had always been careful with her money. Now, she was careful with her voice too. Where she put it, what she demanded with it. She had spent a lifetime living with other people's choices. It felt good, even this late in the game, to know that her choices could ripple out and reshape a place in her town. As the bus pulled up and she climbed on, she settled into her usual seat. The city rolled by outside, past repaired sidewalks and old houses, past new murals and faded signs. In her purse, her wallet rested next to a small folded piece of paper. The torn check, taped back together, edges still ragged. She kept it not because it had any financial worth. It didn't, but because it reminded her of two truths at once. Things can be broken. And sometimes, with enough work, enough honesty, enough insistence, they can be mended into something stronger than before.